both so much for joining me. I'm really excited to learn more about Paysense, who you are, and what the history is behind the company. So tell me a little bit about what led you to ultimately create Paysense.
So just prior to forming Paysense, I was the head of product for PayPal Asia Pacific. So while I was the product manager for the region, I got the opportunity to look at a lot of companies across India. And I think just as this is 2015, early 2015, I saw a massive surge in e-commerce or e-tail in India. So everything was going digital, the Amazons, the Flipkarts, the Tiny Owls, there was a whole, the housing.coms, there was a whole bunch of services that were just coming alive. And the Indian consumer, with the I think the mobile devices and the data plans going mainstream, finally had access to a lot of these digital services. So it just felt like the right time where a lot of the Indian market was coming alive and was going digital. And as I was surveying the market for potential solutions to buy for PayPal, I just couldn't find anything good. And I was like, man, this is a huge market where e-commerce has taken off, payments is keeping up, but the credit and the access to credit is fundamentally limited. So that was actually the main reason I wanted to come and solve for the market. And I think what I realized and perhaps underestimated even then was the size of the market and the size of the opportunity. And I think the last 3 years have, at least for me, been a huge realization of how vast this opportunity is and how much a tech-led solution can actually have in terms of impact in this market. And that's the journey we've been on for the last 3 years.
I used to be a management consultant in Chicago with A.T. Kearney, and I used to specialize in like retail projects. So as I came here and looked at consumer problems, which I feel passionate about, I looked at e-commerce taking off, like Prashanth said, all the services were taking off, but services are always enabled by credit, and credit is necessary to enable increase in commerce. So what happens is that people do not have the money they need right now to get the services they want right now. The money they get over time, but what we do is that you can get it right now. So access to credit is a vast, big problem in India, and as I think after 3 years, we're still discovering the vastness of the problem. And we're discovering how we can uniquely solve it, and that's very exciting every day.
I think for both of us, what brought us to India was perhaps the convenience play, right? The e-tail, e-commerce convenience play. But I think over the last 3 years, I think what's become more obvious and more apparent to us is that there's a fundamental affordability play that's actually much larger. And I think even though convenience, which I think most folks are going after in online commerce and online payments by introduction of credit is the tip of the iceberg, there's actually a much bigger story that is yet to be played out. And I think it's a fundamentally longer play, a longer term story that's yet to be played out. I think that's the affordability play for the major population of India. So I think what brought us here perhaps is not what keeps us here. I think that's the salient point there.
Sure, and you've obviously identified a major challenge within the space, but tell me a little bit about Paysense, a little more in depth, essentially your elevator pitch, if you will, and who you ultimately are trying to service.
So I think this customer is also looking for two main areas of stuff, right? One is aspirational, like what do they want? And instead of saving for it over 2 years and buying it later, you buy it now and pay for it later. And unplanned expenses, like something happens, something breaks in the house, the kitchen needs a renovation, or the AC broke down, or the washing machine broke down, or there's a medical emergency in the house, not everybody's insured. So unplanned expenses and aspirational purchases are both areas where we serve the customer with what we like to call the right size loan. So it's not always the bank selling a big loan, it's like whatever you want. So you can take a small loan right now, you can come back and take another small loan later.
And it's interesting because trust always seems to be the issue between the technology company and the consumer. But it sounds like you've kind of solved for that challenge in a sense. But what else makes Paysense stand out in essentially what's a crowded marketplace when it comes to fintech?
So I think with any lender, I mean, yes, you have to look at acquisition, you have to look at underwriting, you have to look at collections. I think though we've had some phenomenal partners that we've worked with over the last few years in terms of lending, I think what we've realized and what we've learned is that the opportunity space is fundamentally much larger. And what our models are already predicting is that a lot of the people that we're not serving today or not able to serve because of a certain set of policies or guidelines from our lenders is lost opportunity. Those are credible customers or creditworthy customers that And that's what makes this space very interesting for us. And I think, in fact, as we've looked to open those up, Paysense become the household name in amongst those populations, because these are traditionally customers who have been denied credit or any kind of formal credit for time and time again. So when a Paysense steps in and using technology opens that up, it's actually a huge win for us. And that word spreads very, very quickly. And I think that's, and you were asking us about customer acquisition, word of mouth still is one of our biggest sources of customer acquisition. It's actually also the lowest cost sources of acquisition. So, but I think increasing our servability while maintaining good credit is, we are able to kind of open a lot more doors, not just for the customer, but also for ourselves.
So I think to add to that, one metric that we keep measuring is how many customers come back. Like, what is the retention metric? And what we see from our graph, which Prashanth will show in a bit, is that word of mouth is spreading. But what we see from retention is that these customers come back, and whenever they have a next need for a loan, they come back to us. So in 12-month time frame, we almost see 100% repeat rate, where all the paying customers not only can come back for a very quick subsequent loan, but they also can get increasing amounts of credits with us. So the good behavior on repayments really pays out, because they can get bigger and bigger loans with us. And that's something that they really value, because it's not something they can get outside easily. So Paysense is valuable because it's not just a one-time thing, it's a long-term relationship.
Well, it's
right.
great to hear the challenges that you've solved for in the industry. And thank you both so much for your insights today.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
For Medici Studio, I'm Shannon Rosick.